Howard High School students didn't set out to make history, but they changed lunch counters forever.
That's right. News Channel 9's Greg Thunderberg talked about that, the peaceful protest that they planned in Chattanooga.
Well, guys, you know, it was one of the most significant events that happened. It was actually a week ago today, 54 years ago, that these were just high school students, and many places across the South. You know, it was a lot of students across the Southeast protesting and at sit-in counters in the 1950s and the 1960s. But the unique thing about this, they were the only high school students to have a protest in the Southeast. And one thing about this, or even in the country, but the big thing about this entire story is they didn't realize they would be making history until decades later. It all began here at Howard High School 54 years ago in a math classroom, February 1960. A group of Howard High School students would make their mark on history, but would not realize it until decades later.
Classmates got together and decided that we would have a sit-in like the college students were doing in other cities.
Ernestine Hall and Booker T. Scruggs II were among them.
But the teacher had not come in, and we as a class said that after school, let us all go down and do a sit-in at these particular stores.
There were rules drafted up.
This is an original copy of those rules that stress what they would do to remain peaceful.
Those rules indicated that we should not retaliate, because we knew about the Martin Luther King nonviolent tactics, and so we wanted to pretty much emulate those tactics because we didn't want to have any problems, really.
After school, they boldly walked inside Woolworths, McClellan, and Grant's and sat at the lunch counters made for whites only.
I think the other customers started to move away from the lunch counters. When we sat down, they moved away. And actually, naturally, we were not served.
The protests went on for about 3 days. Sit-in after sit-in, things turned violent, and some of the students were beaten and thrown in jail.
There were fights. The fire department came out and sprayed us with the hose. It got to be pretty bad.
This is the first time that the fire hoses were actually used to dispel the crowd, to disperse the crowd, and we found out later that after the fire hoses were used in Chattanooga, they were used in Birmingham and some of the other places for the same reason, to keep down the riots.
In the midst of all the chaos and despite breaking the law, the students had silent supporters like teachers and their principal.
See, all of the other civil rights protests were done by college students, they were done by adults through organizations like the NAACP. The class of 1960 was the only high school class that we know of in the country that actually initiated a desegregation process.
And 54 years later, the students tell me that dreary afternoon in 1960, they're glad they sat so students today, both white and black, can stand up for so much more.
The work is not done. There's still work to be done. There are things that they can do to make the city better, even now. Don't just take things for granted, and take advantage of every opportunity there is.
That there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that many of us went through for this particular generation to receive the services, to go to the facilities, and to attend events that they could not have done were they in our particular class in 1960.
And as Mr. Scruggs just said, as well as Ms. Hall, they said there's so much more that can be done. And Josh and Latricia, ironically, today marks the second anniversary of the Trayvon Martin death. And they said, you know, just in that situation, just 2 years ago, how this really rallied a lot of people to fight for that freedom, or justice, I should say, in that case. But so many people still fighting today, 50, 60 years down the road. Yeah. And there's so much more to be done.
And they were so young, but made such a huge impact.
So true.
All right. Thanks a lot, Greg.
Greg, thanks so much.